born Ben was born in Yorkshire, but his family moved to the U.S. and he's went to Dexter Public Schools.
Yep.
Came to a lot of Washtenaw Audubon meetings and field trips during his time here. Found a lot of good birds. He's now graduated. I think he spent a year or two, a semester or two at Michigan State, and then transferred to, I shouldn't have mentioned that, and then transferred to the University of Exeter, and now has graduated from there and will give us a program tonight on the birds of Devon and other areas. Please welcome Ben.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Shall I start sharing my screen then? How do that is it. Hopefully, can everyone see that?
Yes.
It looks great.
Excellent. All right, so basically, I've been here for 3 years now in Southwest England. I've never really birded the summer here to Washtenaw County, but and the first 2 years I didn't really get too much birding done just because of the workload and just not enough time for it. But this last year, especially, thanks to lockdown and COVID, actually, I've had significantly reduced class times and have taken full advantage of it for birding, pretty much. I've done more birding in the last, probably 5 or 6 months than in the rest of the last 3 years combined here, at least. So I'll basically just be going through photos chronologically, kind of, but also by habitat for this year. And then at the end, I've got a few from past years as well for just a few highlights. But anyway, without further ado, this is kind of the area. So on January 5th this year, the UK went into full lockdown, which meant other than exercise, you couldn't really go out, and birding counts as exercise, thankfully, if you're walking about and stuff. So I basically had a walking distance radius from the red dot here, which is where I live in Exeter. So I was basically from January 5th to April 12th, I was birding within walking distance of my home there. And so the key habitats we've got here is the River Exe flows through Exeter, and you've got over here. Can you guys see my mouse? Is that something that says?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay, cool. Just checking. So we've got the River Exe estuary here, which is, especially in winter, the main birding location. It's very tidal. There's a 3-meter tide on the Exe estuary. So this whole thing becomes mud flats for half of the day. And then when it's full, the birds are pushed to marshes on here, and even some of the marshes on the city here. So for most of the time I was birding, especially in January and February, along this stretch here at high tides to pick up all of the wintering waterfowl and waders and stuff. So so the ones here on the left are black-tailed godwits, and then we've got lapwings and golden plover here. So there's just hundreds of thousands of waders winter on the estuary. So about usually at least 1,000 Eurasian golden plovers, and at least 600 or 700 lapwing, and about 500 black-tailed and bar-tailed godwits each. It's hard to get good photos there just because the birds it's an RSPB reserve for the most part, which is all, thankfully for the birds, off limits to prevent dog walkers and stuff from disturbing them while they're feeding, as there's only limited feeding grounds. But so you can see at least the scale of some of the birds here. Here's some more, so some dunlin. We've got Eurasian widgeon, more black-tailed godwits, and some of these are all golden plover down here as well, this little golden band here. Just thousands of them on the estuary, which is just really fantastic to see. This is one of my favorite waders that spends the winter here, the pied avocet. They breed in northern, not Michigan, what am I saying? In northern England, but down here in the south, they are only in winter, but we get really good numbers. In the 90s, they were declining like really badly in the UK, and they were almost gone. But thankfully, they've made a really good recovery, so it's really great to see them and their funny shaped beaks every winter. Here is the Eurasian Curlu. For these, we probably get like wintering numbers of a couple hundred. It's uncommon, but there's lots of them still around. And they have a fantastic call as well. This was taken on the estuary as well, as the high tide was flooding in. I almost got stuck in the mud for this, but I was really happy with this photo. This is a black-tailed godwit. So in terms of the godwits on the northern part of the estuary, so the more freshwatery end, you get a lot of black-tailed godwits, almost entirely godwit flocks there are black-taileds, but further down the estuary you get bar-taileds. I was quite disappointed. I've still not managed to get a good bar-tailed shot, and I was really hoping, especially this spring in the really lovely orange plumage, I'd get one, but sadly they've evaded me. You also get a few rarer waders on the estuary, and this is one of them. So usually after gale force winds, you get red phalaropes, or as they're called in the UK, grey phalaropes, because we never get them in breeding plumage here. So this is a fantastic one, as I missed the red phalarope that was on Schneider Road Pond back in Washtenaw quite a few years back, and I've wanted to see one for a while, so this was a good one to get last November. In addition to the waders, there's also large amounts of waterfowl, so mostly introduced Canada geese, as you can see down here, but you do get some of the more unusual geese as well mixed in. So this group of, I think there was 7 total, Barnacle Geese, spent the winter among the Canada geese on Exminster marshes, which is where most of the birds go at high tide. They're actually surprisingly hard to pick out among all the Canada geese and Brent geese that hang out there. And although you'd expect them to be fairly common, being this side of the Atlantic, given that you can get them, of course, in the eastern US as well, as fairly uncommon rarities. They're actually really quite rare in the Southwest. Most of the UK's populations of wintering geese, especially barnacle geese, pink-footed geese, and tundra bean geese as well, almost all of them are limited to the east coast, especially Norfolk and the east coast of Scotland. We get almost none here of the migratory species. I still haven't actually seen a pink-footed goose here, but if you go to the east of England, there's hundreds of thousands of them. So it's kind of interesting that. But barnacle geese are one of my favorite geese, so I was pleased to get these. And then the most common goose on the estuary, and most of the geese on the marshes are Canada geese, but on the estuary itself, almost everything is a Brent goose. The ex-estuary is internationally important for wintering Brent geese. And so you can see here, these are dark-bellied Brent geese. So the dark-bellied Brent goose is the predominant subspecies in England. You can see it's got a dark belly, basically. It's kind of just brownish colored. So we do actually, there's 4 accepted subspecies of Brent geese. And So this is another dark-bellied. And this is also another dark-bellied. You can see this fully dark-bellied. But then we also have several other species and subspecies. And the subspecies, almost all of them have been seen in Devon. I think the only one that might not have is Grey-Bellied Bran, which is a little known subspecies from high Arctic Canada that no one really is sure, because it's basically an integrate of this subspecies, which is Pale-Bellied Bran, this is the predominant subspecies on the east coast of the US, and I think all Michigan records pertain to Pale-Bellied Bran. But, and you can see another Pale-Bellied Bran here, actually, with the dark-bellieds. They really stand out, actually. It was one of the things and having not seen Brent geese when I was in Michigan, coming over here and learning about the different subspecies is a lot of fun. So yeah, you can see it really stands out. But then you also have this one, which is the black Brant, which is the predominant one actually on the Pacific coast of the US. So it's kind of surprising that you do get them here, but they're pretty much annual in the UK and the Netherlands for whatever reason. And you can see, so while it has an overall much darker color than even the dark-bellied Brent geese, they have this nice white flash right here. And they also have a much wider white neckline there than, say, the pale-bellied. But gray-bellied is a really tricky one. This is probably the closest candidate to a gray-bellied that I've managed to find sifting through the geese here. So you can see it's paler and more of a pale brown overall tone than the dark-bellieds. So this is probably a pale-bellied Brant, but it's got a bit too much dark down towards the legs and the belly. So I'm guessing that this isn't a gray-bellied Brant just because of how rare they are, but this is kind of what they look like. And then on the left here, you have a normal dark-bellied Brant with that nice dark belly. So yeah, and you also get just a lot of the same ducks that you would get in the US. So pintail, instead of American widgeon, we have Eurasian widgeon, of course, and we have lots of green-winged teal, but of course they are predominantly of the Eurasian subspecies. So you have like this white line here that goes horizontally, whereas the American subspecies has this nice little vertical line. This male teal, well, American green-winged teal, hung out for about 3 months this winter on Exmouth's marshes with the several hundred Eurasian subspecies. But it's one of the more common American birds over here, the green-winged teal. So, and given all of the waterfowl, there are also some good raptors usually around Exmouth's marshes. So you've got short-eared owls, which of course you are familiar with in Michigan as well. This is a composite image of the same bird getting harassed by gulls, but yeah, it's always good to see them for sure. Any owl is good to see. We also have long-eared owls. They're really, really rare as a breeding bird here. Some of the woods up on the hills around here probably do have them breeding, but this is the only one I've managed to come across. And this bird was actually, it spent the entire winter in a small decorative pine in the middle of a suburban neighborhood with no big trees around it at all. And the neighborhood was right across from Exmouth's marshes. So we think that at night it was probably going out to hunt on the marshes and the fields there. So it's quite cool to see. And then we also have barn owls. This is actually, there are some around Exmouthster as well, but the best pair for photography that I found was a pair on farmland nearby. And I spent probably, I don't know, 5 hours every day for a few weeks trying to get photos of them. And it's just fantastic to see that ghost-like forms across the farmland. And you know, this one's diving. This ended up with a successful catch of a mouse. So it's good to see. You can also see that they would occasionally just fly really close, and it was just fantastic to watch. One of my favorite birds. More barn owls. And then this is my favorite shot I managed of them. I was stood up on a hedge basically, and in Devon, hedges are kind of just like a little ridge along the road basically with some bushes, and I was just hidden in the bushes at the top of this little ridge, and it flew just directly at me, and it was just fantastic. So yeah. And then of course, with any farmland in Britain, there are just ungodly numbers of ringneck pheasant, which I'm sure you're also familiar with from Washtenaw County, but not in the same way that we get them here. So of course they are also introduced here for game shooting, but they are released in just incredible numbers. So about over 50 million, I think about 58 million ringneck pheasants are released in the UK every year. I actually wrote my dissertation about the problems that this causes basically and why it should be illegal, but they do quite a lot of damage to habitat, and yeah, it's unfortunate to see that. They are really incredibly beautiful birds, but we do not need 50 million a year being released. So yeah, it's another photo of this pair. And then here we have some more waders. These are the like red shanks and green shanks and stuff. So the shanks, as I'm going to call them, are usually on the they're pretty much only on the estuary. Even at high tide, they're pretty unwilling to budge and will just stay on the like estuary wall if necessary. So we've got on the right here, this is a green shank. You can see it's kind of got like these greenish legs, so hence the name. And then we've got a spotted red shank over here, which you also will perhaps be familiar with from Washtenaw County. Funnily enough, I think my mum actually chased the Washtenaw County bird, and in doing so managed to see spotted red shank in Washtenaw County before I had it on my Devon County list, because they're pretty rare over here as well. It's less than annual on the X estuary. It's more of an eastern bird again, so this is also cool to see. I enjoy spotted red shank. Sadly not in breeding plumage though. And we've got the common red shank. So this is by far and away the most common of this type of shorebird on the X estuary. There's just thousands of them. So yeah, but I found a good spot where, as the tide came in, they would be pushed along the shore, so you would get them coming reliably in flight across the same path basically every time. So that's how I managed to get these shots. And then in the same place, actually, this really cooperative group of red-breasted mergansers were coming in on a regular basis. And so I managed some decent shots of them as well. They were actually displaying and calling, which is something I've never seen from any merganser, I guess. So that was fantastic to watch as well. But they are declining here, actually. So apparently, before I arrived in Devon, in past years, they've had as many as 200 or 300 on the estuary overwintering. But while I've been here, it's never been more than like 15 or 20. So it's unfortunate, to say the least. But they are fantastic birds, just really nice to see in that plumage as well. Got some diving here. And it was just crazy how close this one was getting, actually. There was a river outflow into the estuary, just a stream basically that was going out into the estuary. And it must have been finding really good fish on this, because I laid down at the end of it and he would just approach just incredibly close. It's just, I've never seen such detail on these guys. It's just great. This is not from, well, this is not a bird that I photographed. Well, this photograph wasn't from this winter, sorry. But common shell ducks are just another one of the most common wintering waterfowl on the estuary. They look really funny, so I finally managed a good photo this spring, which is the case here. So, and then you've also got some diving ducks. So the predominant diving duck by far is Tufted Duck, and they're actually really tame at some sites, hence the photo. I think they're really attractive ducks, to be honest, with that purplish gloss. I think this is a young male. Could be wrong though. And then this is actually something of a rarity here. Greater Scorb is an uncommon wintering bird in England and a bit rarer further west here. We don't get Lesser Scorb, that's an American species, but it is an occasional vagrant to Britain. I haven't seen one here, at least. So this one was with Tufted Ducks at the location where they're really tame. So he, over the course of the winter, also became really tame. So this is my best opportunity I've had, I think, to photograph these guys. Another bird that I've been really happy to photograph on the estuary, actually at the same location as the mergansers, was this little egret and there's a lot of little egrets on the estuary, but usually they're really skittish. But this one, every evening, if the tide was coming in, he would walk the same path at about the same time, just along this corner of the estuary, and was just, first of all, an incredible hunter. And while I was watching him, in the space of 5 minutes, he would catch probably a fish every 10 to 20 seconds, which is just incredible, to be honest. But he was also so intent on catching these fish that he really didn't mind my approaching whatsoever. So got a few decent ones over a few weeks of trying to photograph him. And you can see, and they're the equivalent of snow egret in America, but I think I'm right in saying the main difference is that they have just these 2 plumes here, whereas snowy, I think, has quite a lot more plumes. Again, I could be wrong on that, actually. So. And here was one in full breeding plumage, fluffed up, which was quite cool to see. And then we've got great herons, so our equivalent of great blue heron. The main difference here is a lack of rufous coloring down here and stuff, I think. And then this is obviously a horned grebe, but in the UK they're called Slavonian grebes. But they are actually a really rare bird on the west coast here. But this individual, his name is Herbert, has been here since 2007, and I think sadly passed away this year because I haven't seen him in a few weeks now. But he had continuously been at this one corner of the estuary ever since 2007, because I think he was rescued from an oil spill offshore and released into the estuary, and for whatever reason he never actually ended up leaving, but seemed to be doing well, as he lasted, I think, at least double what any other horned grebe has ever been recorded to live. So pretty impressive stuff from Herbert. Then further down the estuary, you get the sandy beaches at the bottom, and the shorebirds there are quite different from those of the upper estuary and the mudflats. So here we have red knot. And you do get them on the estuary, but they're much more common down on the beach for sure. Sadly not in breeding plumage, but still a fantastic looking bird, I think. So, and also sandling. So this one and that nice wintering plumage. So there's a group of at least 50 or so sandling, usually on the beach at the bottom of the estuary in the winter. And they left in March, but now breeding plumage birds that had been wintering in Africa are also coming through. So I'll get around to those at the end when I get to spring migration. But anyway, we've also got common ringed plover. So very similar, of course, to semi-palmated plover in America. But I think the most reliable feature, other than And if you can see the semi-palmated bits between the toes, that's of course quite reliable. But other than that, if you look at any really detailed image of a semi-palmated plover, you'll notice a very slight gold rim to the eye, like a little gold ring almost. And common ring plovers don't appear to ever have that. So if you're ever looking for a common ring plover in 4 Mile Lake, that's what to look for, guys. So, here we have Eurasian oystercatcher. As opposed to American oystercatcher, which I think generally is a fairly uncommon low density bird in most of its range, at least where I've been. Eurasian oystercatcher here is just an incredibly common bird. I think at high tide roosts, there's at least 500 or 600 of them usually. But that being said, they're really not approachable. Probably the most skittish wader we have here, so I haven't managed many good photos, to be honest, despite them being really cool looking and common, but yeah. Anyway, here we have one eating, actually, I think a mussel, so almost living up to its name, actually. And then we've also got the rocky shores. So further down the beach, it becomes more rocky, and there's also some rock outcrops in the sea, which is actually the main place that we get purple sandpipers, ruddy turnstones, and all of that sort of good stuff. The purple sandpipers are just really approachable there, so it's another fun one to see for sure. Very approachable. Unfortunately, the main spot where there's the rocky outcropping, and they're usually feeding there at low tide, but unfortunately there's just crazy numbers of dog walkers on that beach, and they'll let their dogs out on this rocky outcropping and just invariably flushing these birds, which is not good to see at all. There's a ruddy turnstone hanging out with them. And then we've got rock pipits, which are uncommon in most of the country, but really common in the right habitat down here, which is rocky shorelines. So. And then we've got city birding, so away from the estuary. So some key locations here for my birding around here is the river down here, and Riverside Park has some open areas basically. And then there's a cemetery over here, which gets some migrants and stuff. And then we've got this little valley here, which has wintering, well, actually breeding as well, tawny owls and a few other goodies. So some of the most common birds here, basically our garden birds are European robin and dunnock, which is actually a type of accentor. But just, yeah, both very common birds, but I still haven't gotten bored of robins. I mean, they're fantastic looking little guys. So, then our goldfinch, European goldfinch. Arguably not as colorful as American goldfinch, but a nice looking bird nonetheless. Great spotted woodpecker, so kind of our ecological equivalent of downy woodpecker. It's by far and away the most common woodpecker here. And then we also have in winter large groups of wintering thrushes. So predominantly these are red-winged fieldfare, and this guy's a missel thrush. Missel thrush of the three here is definitely the rarest, and in fact this is only one of two that I've ever seen in the city of Exeter. But what was really interesting about this was I'd read in my field guide that missel thrushes tend to basically just defend one tree as their food source for the entire winter. And this bird I actually found by a fruiting tree in a car park of a supermarket here. Terrible habitat, but anyway, I was wondering whether it would stay to defend this tree, and it did. It stayed all winter defending this tree from basically anything, and was the only bird usually in this car park, which was quite funny. It's another photo of him. And these guys are the most common of the wintering thrushes here. So this is a redwing. Although migration here isn't the same spectacle as it is in North America in terms of all of your colorful warblers and everything. One of the most amazing scenes of migration, I guess, for me, that I've witnessed is just the incredible numbers of redwing that migrate through here at night. Basically, whenever I go outside, especially in October and November when a lot of them are coming through, if I just go outside in the city, I'm guaranteed to hear just, I mean, tens, if not hundreds of them flying overhead just constantly. It's pretty amazing. They have a very high pitched flight call, seep sort of sound. It's very cool. And yeah, anyway, also got fieldfare here. For whatever reason, these guys are not as common as redwing in the city, but anywhere else, they're pretty much even with redwing and usually together. I'm not sure why they don't like cities then. So. This is a green woodpecker. Again, this is kind of, they behave a lot like a northern flicker, so they'll go after ants and all of that and spend a lot of time on the ground. They're really funny looking guys. In the city here, there's only a couple spots where they tend to be, but I did manage to get a few good photos of them at least. So, and then we've got Eurasian Ren. So these guys were only recently split from winter wren in the US, and the winter wren is quite a difficult bird to get in Washtenaw County at least at times. Eurasian Ren is, I think, the most common or most abundant breeding bird in the UK. I mean, they're just everywhere. And it's really great to hear that song. As you know, it's a really nice song. And yeah, they're funny little guys to have around. Our most common warbler is not nearly as colorful as any of the American warblers, but this is a common chiff-chaff, and we get small numbers winter in city parks, especially along any water. It doesn't really snow here, so basically ever, and things don't really get to freezing point either, so basically any water will be running in winter, and there's usually a lot of greenery still around, so we get these guys fly catching basically over any waterway like that. And then those same waterways will often hold white-throated dippers like this guy. Usually the best spot that I have in the city for them is just, it's a very overgrown waterway, so there's almost no light gets down to the water there, so that's why this is a bit of a noisy image, but they're fantastic to watch as well. I love dippers. And another classic bird of that sort of stream habitat is the grey wagtail. Yeah, so they usually hang out wherever there's white-throated dippers. So. And another great bird of streams and rivers here in the city is the kingfisher, common kingfisher. I think this has got to be the UK's prettiest bird. I can't think of anything better than this. I just love kingfishers, and I was really happy to get lucky with this shot. I was watching some gulls and saw this dart past it, and usually whenever I see a kingfisher, it's just flying through, they zip through, and you never see where it lands. But this one, I thought I saw where it landed and approached it, and sure enough, there he was. So, and this one is actually a female kingfisher, I think, but you can see this red on the beak, whereas this guy has got his all black beak. Yeah, another really fun bird though. This is the same male from earlier. They're a lot smaller than belted kingfishers. Very little guys. And then we have a water rail. This is a terrible shot, apologies. But yeah, and interestingly, they actually, they are associated with water, but they're often not actually in a reed bed or in any wet area. They'll actually be quite a lot of the time in just really dense scrub around water. So it's a bit interesting. And we've got common moorhen. So very similar to gallinule, common gallinule in Michigan. but much more common here. I mean, these guys will be out in the open all the time. They're often in really developed urban areas. This was taken right in the city center, actually. But yeah, it's another attractive bird to see around. And it's weird seeing them so much, just having them be so much more common than their counterpart is in the US. Then occasionally, this is a common red shank, again, going back to the estuary birds, but occasionally they do make their way up the river and into the city, and this is one of those times. I think this is probably my favorite image I managed of this species. So they're a bit more approachable, I think, when they're in the city. Yeah, not sure why, but they're really skittish on the estuary usually. And another bird of the River Exe in the city, these little grebes are pretty cool looking guys, and yeah, they live up to the name. They are very little and fluffy. So, and occasionally we get slightly rarer birds in the actual city itself. This is in the same spot of the river in downtown that I photographed the other stuff, this female long-tailed duck, and it stayed around for a few days. I think this was my favorite photo I managed of it, but as you can see, it was raining really hard at the time, and I was absolutely, I looked like a drowned rat, to be honest, after this. So, but it was worth it, and yeah, fantastic looking little birds. So. She stayed probably for 3 or 4 weeks, so I got quite a few chances to go down and get some photos. So. And common mergansers, and so this is actually the Eurasian subspecies of common merganser. But they over here they're a lot less common than they are. Again, they're pretty much reserved to like highlandy sort of reservoirs, at least in Devon. So this is quite a fun bird to get in downtown again. So, and then here's a really interesting one actually. So, white stork went extinct in the UK, I think roughly about 500 years ago. And in the last few years, and I think they've been around as vagrants occasionally since then, but they haven't bred certainly for over 500 years. But the Knepp Estate in southern England, which is sort of a wildlife sanctuary sort of place, has been undergoing a massive rewilding project essentially. And one of the main species for this rewilding project has been white stork, and they've managed to reintroduce quite a few of them. And actually last year, one of the reintroduced birds that was having a nest actually attracted a mate that was not a reintroduced bird, it was actually a vagrant. And they successfully bred together. So that was the first occasion of a white stork breeding in the UK for over 500 years, which is pretty fantastic. And there's a group of 5 of them, all from the Knepp Estate. I think these are all birds that were young from the reintroduction program, I think. They actually turned up in the city of Exeter. Yeah, so that was really fantastic to see as well. Yeah, so there were 5 of these youngsters around. They stayed for an evening, so yeah, got to enjoy them. Then we've got white wagtail. This is the British subspecies, pied wagtail. They have a much blacker back than the nominate alba subspecies, or any of the subspecies from Asia that are more likely to turn up in North America. So it's a very dark bird overall. And then another pretty common bird around the city, at least anywhere where it's open, is stone chat. They're really attractive little chats, so a good one to have around. And we've got meadow puppets. This one was just really fluffed up, so I was happy with this photo. But yeah, they're just common anywhere where there's an open area, really. And skylark again, so again, pretty much just common anywhere where there's open land, especially, they're especially associated with farmland though. And another city bird, although not actually in Exeter yet, they are in several nearby cities, including Plymouth now, is the rose-ringed parakeet. So they are famously one of the most successful introduced species in the UK. And the London population, that's where this was taken, has just absolutely exploded in recent years. I mean, I think there's well over 30 or 40,000 of them. So yeah, interesting to say the least. Yeah. Very attractive, if a bit ecologically damaging. And then we've got some woodland specialists here. So this is the main woodland area around Exeter. This is probably a 5 or 6 mile walk for me uphill. And you can see, I think, kind of, it's a very managed forest. It's not just a naturally grown forest. It's mostly cultivated pines and stuff. But nonetheless, you do get some good birds there. There's a lot of crossbills in there. We also get siskins, so a few colorful siskins. They're always at the feeders up there. Chaffinches are one of the most common finches here, but occasionally we do get brambling mixed in, which is nice to see. Jays are common anywhere where there's woodland, really. This is a yellowhammer, not really a woodland bird. It's more of an open area specialist, but they're kind of difficult to come across in Devon, actually. And one of the main places for them is actually the feeding station up in Halden Wood there. So while it's definitely the most common of the yellow buntings, I guess, in the UK, the predominant one in South Devon is actually soil bunting, which I'll get to later. But yeah, this is a yellowhammer. And then we've got marsh and willow tits. Marsh tits on the right here are actually, they are by far and away the most common of these two species. I've only ever seen willow tit once, and they've declined over 90% in the since 1970 in the UK, and mostly due to declining habitat. But they are really similar, as you can see. So from what I've read, and voice is definitely the best way to tell them apart, but you can see there's a slight difference here in that there's this pale edging right on the base of the bill here, whereas the light makes it a bit difficult to see, but willow tits don't really have that. They're also a bit warmer colored and have like more contrasty white on the wings than marsh tit. So you can see the contrasty wing a bit better in this photo. And then you've got this is a marsh tit, quite a cold color, just, yeah, much duller, I guess, than willow tit. And I guess you can also actually see the white again at the base of the bill there, whereas there is no white down at the base of the bill there on this willow tit. So yeah, one of the most challenging IDs though around here. Got Eurasian nuthatch. Then we've got spring migration. Spring migration in the UK is not the same as it is in the US, as I've already alluded to, but there is still some really cool stuff, and we've got some good rarities occasionally as well. So this was a really lucky one early in migration for me, which is this group of whooping swans flew over while I was birding, and these are actually less than annual in Devon, so they're much more common on the east coast of England. One of the classic first migrants in England that everyone waits for every year tend to turn up around the end of February, start of March, are these northern wheatears. And so I was lucky enough early in March to have a good full of them one from that same day. You can see this one was actually flying, and this post is about 50 meters out to sea. So this one was flying over the channel from France. So, and then another interesting migrant that we get here is not as showy, but in terms of singing ability is absolutely brilliant. The Common Nightingale. So in Devon, they are practically extinct at this point, but this was just over the border in Somerset. And I was birding with some friends early in migration, and we were heading out towards London to see a bird that I'll show you next. But we left at 2 in the morning, and since we had a bit of extra time, we decided to stop by a place that I had seen had an eBird record of Common Nightingale from before. And we arrived there at about 3 in the morning, and sure enough, got out the car and there was a nightingale singing away. It's one of the best birding experiences I've had all year, actually. It was just really satisfying. Just such a good song. I definitely recommend to any of you out there that you should go and have a listen after the presentation. It's fantastic. So this is the bird I was going to see that day, which is a common cuckoo, but not just any common cuckoo. At a place called Thursley Common near London, actually. There has, for better or for worse, for the last 7 or so years, I think, been a common cuckoo that has become extremely tame, and people do occasionally feed it. He arrived back from Africa, the earliest he's ever managed this year. I think this was like right at the beginning of April. And anyway, so we arrived at 6 in the morning and waited out in his normal field. Protocol usually is to put a stick in the ground that you like the aesthetic look of and wait for him to turn up, basically. And we were waiting for about 2 hours. And I was beginning to question this, but sure enough, he popped up, and as you can see, he really was really tame. And seeing such a cool bird this close was just, I mean, it was amazing, to be honest. His expressions are just fantastic, I think. This is the branch we chose, or one of the branches we chose. He's a very popular attraction these days down there, and there was probably a crowd of 50 or 60 photographers with him that day. So he's a very well-fed cuckoo, and he's lived past his expected lifetime. He basically just hops in every 2 hours to pick up some food and then goes back to singing and breeding, I suppose. So
what's his name? What's his name, Ben?
Sorry, yeah, it's Colin the cuckoo. A very English name. So yeah, Colin. And yeah, he's been there for 7 years. So yeah, he's a really good character as Colin. Hopefully he returns next year as well. And at Colin's favorite spot, there's also a few red starts. This is a common red start that have been enjoying the mealworm action as well, I guess. And they'll come in and try and steal Colin's food, but they're pretty attractive. But in the meantime, while you wait for him to come back, so yeah. And then another really good bird on Thursley Common, and you do also get it in Devon as well, but this was taken at Thursley Common where they're a bit more cooperative. And this is a Dartford Warbler. And Dartford Warbler is predominantly a bird of North Africa and Iberia, but they do stretch their range just into southern England, basically. And they like a very specific gorse heathland sort of habitat, so open, and you can see this like spiky gorse bushes, basically, and the yellow gorse flowers in the background here. And I think, yeah, they're another one of my absolute favorite birds to photograph here. They're tiny little guys. And this one, and usually they fly the second you get even slightly close, and they'll fly directly into the bottom of the densest bush around. as is typical, of course. But this guy was just intent on singing his heart out and just could not be bothered and just stood out right out in the open, which was just fantastic. And this is maybe my favorite photo I've managed this spring, to be honest. It was just really satisfying to get that close to him. And yeah, just hearing that scratchy little song as well. This one is another Dartford Warbler, this time taken in Devon. So this is probably the best photo I've managed of one out here in Devon, where they're a bit more skittish. So still a very attractive bird though. Then another common migrant here, especially as we get into May, is the whimbrel. So these Eurasian whimbrel, you won't see it in this photo, but I think the next one, yeah, you'll see they have this white rump patch, whereas North American whimbrel, Hudsonian whimbrel as they are, I think, called, do not have that white rump patch. But yeah, on a good migration day, there's several hundred will usually come through. And I took this photo while I was trying to do a sea watch, and whimbrel just kept on coming in off the sea, which was just really fun to watch. And this is a sandling as promised and close to breeding plumage. So once the wintering sandling move on, there's usually a brief period in like April where there aren't really any sandling around, but as it gets into May here, a lot of the West African wintering birds start to come through, and we get pretty good movements of them. And it's, I think, probably the first time I've actually seen them in close to breeding plumage. So it was a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun to photograph because they're usually really cooperative and just funny to watch as they run about in the waves. Here he is having a scratch. Then we also get breeding plumage dunlin coming through, which is also nice to see. This guy was trying to hide behind some seaweed in the wind. We also get some warbler migration of a different kind. So this is, these are Sylvia warblers, that genus. This is a greater whitethroat. So these start coming through in May here. And then this is another Sylvia species. So this is garden warbler. And it does, famously, garden warbler is identifiable on the basis that it has no real identification points. It's just dull, basically. Its scientific name is Sylvia borin, which is close enough to Sylvia boring, which it may as well be, but I think it does have a certain attractiveness to it. I kind of like this little gray bit on the back here, but maybe I've just spent too long here. But yeah.
Oh
yeah.
gosh.
Are you there, Juliet?
You can post a question in the chat, Juliet. Ben, sorry to distract you. Someone was asking if you could show the picture of Colin the cuckoo again.
Ah, yes. Back here. Hold on. Sorry about that. Yeah, here is Colin. I'll go through them all again if you would like. He is a fantastic looking bird, isn't he? There really isn't anywhere, I don't think, where you can get so close to a cuckoo like that. And definitely if you are in England during the summer, and he's very accessible from London, so I recommend giving him a visit because he's quite a character. Unfortunately, cuckoos are actually declining really heavily in the UK on the most part, especially from lowland areas, but at Thursley Common, they seem to be doing well. He's one of, I think, about 3 males that were calling when I was there, so a very attractive and strange looking bird. I was really happy. When we arrived at 6 in the morning, we spent a while trying to find nice looking branches to stick in the ground. I was pretty pleased with this find. The some nice moss on there, and Colin seemed pleased with it as well. So, and this was when he just hopped right in front of me. I mean, I was laying on the ground and he just flew right down to me basically. And at one point he was too close for my camera to focus, which was just, it was just amazing to look up from the camera and see him that close. And shall I go back and resume then? Yeah. Where was I? Sylvia's. Oh yeah. So this is Garden Warbler again. Here's another non-Sylvia warbler. This is a sedge warbler. And they are tricky to photograph. As you can see, this was shot through a lot of stuff. Sedge and reed warblers are both brownish sort of warblers that hide in reeds basically. And you don't really see them. So still, they have quite cool songs. So yeah. And this is willow warbler, which is quite a lot like the chiff chaff I showed you earlier, but sort of whiter, yellower, brighter sort of bird with pale legs here. And they don't overwinter here. They are more of a strict migrant. So yeah. And this is one of my favorite introduced birds. I do have a bit of a soft spot for Mandarin Ducks. They act a lot like wood ducks in the US. They're cavity nesters. And they're actually they are countable here, but they are actually quite rare. And they require a pretty specific habitat. You really only tend to find them in densely wooded riparian habitat, where you have like streams and stuff with overhanging branches and stuff. They seem to like that. I've only managed to see them a couple of times here, and this male was out and about when I arrived at this location for them earlier in the year. But unfortunately, a dog walker scared him off and I never found him again. But I still managed some okay photos, and it was just, yeah, they are really nice birds to see. Just crazy attractive ducks. Then this is a terrible photo of the moon, but basically, this is an atmospheric photo. When I was, oh yeah, so earlier in April, I was trying to pick up the last of my life and needs alerts, I guess, in the UK. And two of those were black grouse, like this guy, and red grouse. And so me and a friend headed up to a mountain in Wales. And I left at about 9 p.m. and arrived there at 2 in the morning. And we started hiking out over this moorland, sort of, not really a mountain, I guess. It's more of a very large hill, I suppose. Anyway, and the second we got out of the car there, I mean, you could just hear all of the red and black grouse calling, starting their displays even at 2 and 3 in the morning, which is just really great to hear. I mean, just awesome. And so we hiked up to a location where we could hear a lot of black grouse calling. Our intention was to hike up basically in the dark and then hide before the sun got light so that we could watch their display. And we did that. And it was freezing cold, and I was laying in this really uncomfortable, sort of sharp, spiky gorse stuff to photograph this. And I couldn't feel my feet at all by the end of it, because it was freezing. But it was an awesome experience. This was taken just as it was getting light. And at the start, you can see they kind of do this like jumping around basically, and all we could really see to start with, as it was just getting light, was this white flashing under the wings as they were jumping about. And we could just hear, they have sort of like a wavering sort of call that's, I recommend looking it up afterwards. It's a fantastic sound. Black grouse here. Yeah, and it was just an amazing spectacle to watch so closely.
And where in Wales was that?
It's at a place called World's End. in Denbighshire. It's quite well known. It's a badly kept secret. Basically, it's kind of near Liverpool, actually. It's very near the English border in northern Wales, basically. And it has, I think, the highest density of black grouse anywhere in Europe, I believe, and a very, very high like density of red grouse as well. So willow ptarmigan, as you would call it here. But red grouse is like the British subspecies of willow ptarmigan, and they don't ever go white in winter, whereas most others, well, all other subspecies do. So anyway, this is just fantastic to watch though, and I highly recommend an early morning visit to World's End if you ever get the chance. So this is the male black grouse. Here they are flying on the hillside later in the day. This is a female black grouse here. This is a red grouse, so willow ptarmigan, doing a little display flight, I think. But anyway, I didn't really manage to get any crazy good shots of either, but it was just fantastic to see either of them really. And both were lifers for me, so very satisfying day all around, and well worth the 2 a.m. wake up. And this guy is a sill bunting. So I was saying earlier how yellow hammers are more common in most of England, of like the bunting species basically. But sill buntings are in the UK limited only to the Devon, the South Devon coast, and slightly into Cornwall as well. But in their stronghold, which pretty much is exactly where I am, they are really quite common. And this male was just really, really cooperative this spring. He set up his territory right along this very busy trail and just didn't mind the people. I guess he was very used to people, and he would just sing all day. And these yellow gorse flowers as well, so it was very good for photography. They're a lot more common in Spain, I think, sill buntings, but they are actually quite a rare bird in the UK, outside of Devon. He would just let me get incredibly close. They're really nice pattern birds, though. This is a female sill bunting, photographed at a different location, but yeah. And here we have another southwestern specialty, at least in UK terms. This is a red-billed chough, and you can see he's got some bling down there. There aren't many choughs left in the UK, but they are now increasing thanks to conservation efforts. Most of the ones you do see in Cornwall are ringed like this. They're also in southern Wales on the coast. But yeah, this was taken in, well, basically at Land's End in Cornwall, so right at the end of England on the Atlantic coast there. There's some fantastic scenery around there. It's just basically these valleys and stuff right at the end of the UK. With beautiful blue waters around, and yeah, some great birding. This is a linnet, a very common finch on coastlines around here. Okay, so another aspect of birding in the UK is there's really high levels of vagrancy compared to most areas of the world, really. There isn't an incredible diversity of native birds here comparatively, but the British list is still very long just because of the sheer number of rarities that do turn up. These aren't really a rarity anymore. These are cattle egrets, as you can see, associating with cattle. And actually, egrets in general in the UK, I think as recently as like the 70s and 80s, I believe, no egret species were really that regular in the UK, but little egret is now very common. Cattle egret has become pretty common in the south of England here, and great egret is also spreading northwards into England and is really common at some sites as well. So probably largely due to climate change, but also because they've recovered a lot of habitat, especially in the south of England in terms of wetlands, like the Somerset levels. But yeah, here's another southern heron species. So black-crowned night heron, a different subspecies. I think the American subspecies has actually been seen in the UK, but this, I presume, is the Mediterranean, well, from the Mediterranean populations, and is a young bird. It's been here for a while. This is a northern mockingbird, as I'm sure you'll all recognize. Not a bird I was expecting to see in Devon for sure, but earlier in February this year, this turned up in a back garden near Exeter. And I presume it was ship assisted, at least to some extent, but I think, yeah, this is the third record for the UK, the last being in the 80s in Essex, I believe. But yeah, a really funny bird to turn up here. And actually, so it stayed for over a month in this garden near Exeter, but it then moved like 200 miles in the space of a day into eastern England, and then showed up about a month later in the far north of England. So he's been doing a little bit of a tour around. So here's another American bird that we get as a rarity here. So white-throated sparrow, of course. Yeah, I think especially due to the wind directions and the general patterns of storms coming across from the west over the Atlantic, especially in fall, you tend to get a lot of American vagrants, a lot more than the eastern US really gets of European birds. So we get a lot of US warblers and sparrows, and especially shorebirds are very common really. So pectoral sandpiper and actually buff-breasted sandpiper as well are both pretty regular migrants actually. I would say buff-breasted sandpiper is probably more common in Devon and Cornwall than it is in Washtenaw County even, so remarkably. I really don't know why that is. It doesn't make much sense to me, but anyway, they'll often turn up in groups of 4 or 5 out here, despite being a North American bird, of course. So anyway, this is a vagrant from the east, however. This is a little bunting from eastern Siberia, I guess, East Asia, really. This guy spent the winter near the same place as the white-throated sparrow, and it was fun to see. He was actually singing when I arrived, because I went to see him this spring after lockdown ended, of course, and yeah, so he was still around and singing his heart out. Here we have the Loch Ness Monster, of course. No, this is a ruddy shelduck, which is an interesting case of vagrancy in the UK, because there's a very large released population in Switzerland and South Germany, I think, that every July especially, I think, has a movement of several thousand birds, like a migration northwest into the Netherlands, and a lot of those birds then overshoot into the UK. And so it's kind of a case of natural vagrancy, but it's also, they are from an introduced population, presumably. So yeah, and over here we have a ring-necked duck, which is one of the most common water birds that comes from American shores, at least over here. In fact, you'll often get groups of several turning up, actually. This is from the east again, though. This is an olive-backed pipit. And this I left at 4 in the morning for, to go basically to Land's End in Cornwall again. And I spent probably 2 hours looking for this bird, did not find it. I mean, they're really secretive little pipits, and he was frequenting this little like really long grass field basically, and this other side of a cliff near there basically. And I had spent all morning looking basically, and just gave up and sat down on a rock to have some lunch. And the guy passed me and said he had just saw it. So I ditched lunch and went back, and sure enough, did re-find it. And I spent the next few hours trying to get some photos, which I eventually was successful at. So overall, a successful trip. I really like how just delicately patterned olive back pipit is. One of the most attractive pipits, I think. Here's another photo of the olive back pipit. And then this is a really good one from last week, actually. This is a red-rumped swallow. So this is a bird of predominantly Southern Europe. So Spain, Portugal, Turkey, especially Greece. And they are a regular overshoot migrant, I guess, here. A few turn up every year. And this one turned up with just hundreds of swallows down on the river here in, well, yeah, down at the bottom of the river in Exeter, basically. And I spent probably 3 hours just watching it, and it would come within meters of me and just kept on flying up and then round and back, up the river again, round and back, and just kept on doing passes of me. But it was just incredibly hard to get focused on, especially since it was so close. The closing angle was just very difficult to deal with. So, but I eventually got a shot that I was happy with despite all of that. So very attractive little swallows. This is less of a colorful bird, as you can see, but this is a Savvy's warbler. I guess this is mostly from Eastern Europe, but they are a regular territory holder, I suppose, in the UK in spring. And I traveled up to Wales a couple weeks ago to see this bird, and fortunately managed to see it. And I heard it quite a lot of times, but I had about 5 seconds of seeing the bird itself, and here it is singing. So they have a really cool reeling call. So yeah. And then this was from the same day, which I know is not a bird, of course, but it was a really fantastic sighting. At least I thought so. Which was this walrus has been hanging out in that same area of Wales for a few months now. I think it's about like the 4th record in the UK for walrus, and they're predominantly an Arctic species. And anyway, this is a young male, and it's just incredible how massive he is. He's been hanging out on the bottom of basically a lifeguard. Well, no, what is it? It's like a Coast Guard station, basically. And this is a boat ramp, basically, out into the ocean for the Coast Guard boats. And they had an emergency like the day before this, actually, and they had to send someone with an air horn to walk up to him to try and get him to move, and he just wouldn't budge for like half an hour, I think. They eventually convinced him to move very reluctantly. Anyway, it's really cool to see this high Arctic species, although I suppose it may pertain to global warming, unfortunately, which may be why they're ranging so far out of their natural range. This is from last year. This is an interesting bird. Originally, it was reported as a paddy field warbler, but that was quickly retracted, and it was decided that it is a great reed warbler. And I was already chasing it by the time it had been decided that it was a great reed warbler, which I had previously seen in Europe. But so I was kind of disappointed to start with that it wasn't paddy field warbler. But when I arrived, it was a really interesting bird, actually. And I got some okay photos of it. And what makes it interesting is it actually doesn't look very much like the European great reed warblers. It's quite a lot paler. It's a very pale bird overall. And there's a very little known subspecies of great reed warbler from like Kazakhstan and stuff, I think, called Zarivny is the subspecies name. And there aren't any accepted records in the UK, but I suspect this is that subspecies because, well, for a few reasons. Basically, it is very pale, which apparently Zoridni is, but also Great Reed Warbler in the UK is almost exclusively a spring rarity. Like they're fairly regular in May, but this was taken actually right at the beginning of November, I think. So there are only, I think, 2 other November records, and only a handful of fall records of Great Reed Warbler in the UK. And it's a time when you're more likely to have eastern migrants show up. So I think it's hard to say because of the lack of literature available, but it may be the first Zoridni Great Reed Warbler in the UK. So it was a lot of fun studying this bird. And this is a terrible photo, but it is a Eurasian pendulum tit, which is a fun rarity to chase as well. They like these cattails and they carry around the fluff. Yes. Yeah. And then this is another good rarity. This is a sociable lapwing, and these are actually critically endangered, unfortunately, and from primarily like the Middle East and Central Asia, actually, yeah, as well. And they were previously a regular rarity in the UK, I think through the 70s, 80s, and even 90s. But the last one before this individual came in 2008, I believe, as they've declined so strongly. So a lot of people, I think, thought that it wouldn't turn up again because of the situation with its population, but it did. And it was a very cool bird to see, and I was very lucky to see it. And hopefully conservation efforts can prove successful with it in East Asia or Central Asia and the Middle East. So this is another product of conservation efforts. This is not really a vagrant at all, but it is kind of out of range. It's a great busted, and they, again, like white stork before, went extinct in the UK a long time ago and have recently been subject to a reintroduction program on the Salisbury Plain near Stonehenge, actually. This was a young bird from that that had been bred from that program, I guess, and it turned up quite near to me. So it's just a fantastic bird to see again. I'd really like at some point to see the reintroduction population. It's supposed to be quite a sight. But it's been closed due to COVID restrictions recently, the hides there, unfortunately. But yeah, a majestic bird, and hopefully one that's successful in its reintroduction here. And then this is one of the most interesting vagrants I've managed to see here, if not the most interesting. So this is a paddy-field pipit. And paddy-field pipit is not a long-range migrant really at all. It's from Southeast Asia, and the nearest record to this one was from, I think, Dubai. It was definitely from like the United Arab Emirates. So this is a massively far from even the closest vagrant bird previously. And yeah, I'm not sure about the origins, to be honest. I don't think they're kept as cage birds, and it was actually in the same field as an American pipit, which made it even more interesting. But this is at Land's End in Cornwall, so a very good vagrancy site, given its very remote, far western site location. But this is a really interesting bird. It's amazing that it was even picked up, and it is a bit different from Richard's pipit, which would be more likely, I guess, of the large pipit species of South Asia. But anyway, someone managed to decide that based on coal was a paddy-field pipit, and eventually they did get DNA tests done on it, and on a fecal sample collected. And it was in fact a paddy-field warbler, so a paddy-field pipit, sorry. So yeah, quite a remarkable story of vagrancy, and I really would be interested to know the story behind that. I wonder if it was ship assisted, perhaps. But anyway, this is a wryneck, a very unusual species of woodpecker, which has become extinct in the UK as a breeding species, but is a rare vagrant / migrant, I guess. Yeah, just a really bizarre looking bird and fantastic to see. And yeah, they're basically annual, especially in August and September in the West Valleys of Cornwall as well, again. And this is a Ross's gull that turned up last year. So yeah, so you get rarities from all points of the compass really here, which is what makes, I guess, it gives birding in the UK very much a wild card sort of feel. You really don't know what's going to turn up next. This is a red-breasted flycatcher from, I guess, kind of Eastern Europe, but also just a lot of continental Europe I found. That, I believe, is it. So yeah, hopefully you guys all enjoyed that. But yeah, so any questions or anything like that? Yeah.
Great photos, Ben.
Thank you very much.
And we appreciate you staying up beyond your bedtime.
Yeah.
What, it's about 2 a.m. there?
Almost 2 a.m., yeah. Although, given exams last week and stuff, I've known this time before in recent times. So.
Thanks, Ben. That was amazing.
Excellent.
Incredible. Yeah. Oh, there you are.
I'm enjoying the American birds in the background though.
I'm having a look at the chat to see if there are any specific questions, but I think, can people unmute themselves now? And then they can ask live questions. Got a couple new messages. Thank you, very interesting, very fun. Thanks so much from McCreary's.
Jacco says the same for egrets in the Netherlands. So yeah, I guess all of these egret species are pretty much just, they were Mediterranean species almost exclusively until very recently. And now they're really becoming among the most common birds here in southern England. So.
Is there any sign of white-tailed eagles coming back in your neck of the woods? Because they've been booming in the Netherlands.
Really, they are making something of a comeback, and there's an ongoing reintroduction program that started like when I first arrived on the Isle of Wight, right on the southern coast, and then they've just got like acceptance for another reintroduction program to go on in Norfolk in East England. But the Scottish birds are doing really well. I think the Isle of Wight birds turned up for about an hour down on the coast here, but I didn't get down fast enough, so I have not seen one yet. But hopefully, I'm guessing in like 10, 20 years down the line, there'll be a fairly easy bird here by the way it's going. Same with white stork, they seem to be doing really well for that reintroduction program. Great busted might be a bit more limited to like the Salisbury Plain, just because habitat is not good anywhere else really, but a lot of birds are coming back, I guess, thanks to conservation efforts.
That's great. We're noticing some southern species coming up here in Washtenaw. We have a white-eyed vireo that intends to stay at Dolph Park.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I was thinking, we've been speculating in 10 years that there might be just everybody's backyard has its own white-eyed vireo type arrangement.
Yeah, blue grosbeak would probably be
blue grosbeak. And most of you are younger than I am, but when I first came to the university in 1979, I saw my first red-bellied woodpecker, and I'd lived in Michigan my whole life. And I lived 50 miles north in Metro Detroit, and we had flickers in our yard, but we didn't have any red bellies.
That really is incredible. That is.
Yeah.
So
And even in the last 5 years, I have friends in Toronto and they didn't have red-bellied woodpeckers there, but now they're in everyone's yard.
yeah,
So
what's
they're
their status in the UP these days?
I don't know. We have a cottage up in Ludington, which is fairly south of the UP, and there's lots of red bellies there. I don't know how common they are in the UP.
Yeah,
Maybe we
that's
have some.
interesting. So
Yeah.
and as part of my dissertation, I actually wrote a section on like basically the possibility of needing to move birds north in terms of reintroduction programs, especially
Yes.
where geographical barriers exist to movements north. And
Right.
it is really interesting. It seems like some species are adapting extremely well and extremely quickly and are moving at the same rate that you would expect based off climatic change, but other species are just staying still completely and declining. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah. And some are going to have to go upslope into the Alps or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. It's worse, of course, for like northern birds that can't really go anywhere.
Right, right.
You're in trouble if you're on Svalbard, for example.
Oh, right. That's true.
Not much else.
Although barnacle goose is now a common nesting bird in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
So
this is true as
they
well,
come
yeah.
down from Svalbard and elsewhere, and apparently decided that it was going to be fun to stay. So now there's thousands of them nesting in.
Yeah, same in East England. So Suffolk and Norfolk, I think, has a fairly large just resident population now. And a few, I think there's even a few pink-footed geese now that just hanging back and may even breed. I'm not sure.
So a lot of our, pardon the sound of my chickens going up to roost. A lot of our participants tonight have really enjoyed the stories that you told about what you had to go through to see that particular bird. So we're thanking you for that.
Yeah, and public transport has its problems for sure. And a lot of the stuff that I've done has been on public transport. So especially
Amazing.
Rarities that turn up in Cornwall, for example, that's probably the best vagrancy location. My equivalent, I guess, to Whitefish Point, I suppose. And yeah, there's a 4:11 a.m. train that goes out from here. That's like the overnight train from London. And usually, if there's something, I'll take that train. Pretty rough on the sleeping schedule, but it's worth it usually. So.
Yeah. Well, we say in May, sleep is for the weak, but maybe all year long, sleep is for the weak for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you, Faye, the Loch Ness monster photo.
Yeah, that was a great
Yeah, that was
one.
really bad. The heat haze that day was just so bad. It was really annoying. The ruddy shell duck's a really nice looking duck. So I would have been happy to get a bit closer, but sadly enough.
That was a fun photo. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask live? I think you can unmute yourselves.
I'd like to say, Ben, those pictures are really incredible. I mean,
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I wonder if there are other rarities that you've seen that you weren't able to get a good enough shot of.
Yeah, so I saw a yellow-billed loon. That was a really good one, but it was dying light and very distant, and I really only got good enough looks to identify it because someone else there had a Swarovski scope that I could look through. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten anything on that. I really don't think so. Other than that, what else have I seen? And it's hard to remember. I've had some other good stuff for sure. I found a yellow-browed warbler. I mean, they're probably the most common Siberian rarity over here now. But I was really pleased to actually find one myself in Exeter City Centre back in November. So
wow,
that was a fun one to find. Yeah, other than that, I've seen Hume's warbler, which is another East Asian species that turned up over here. I got some terrible photos of that. Yeah.
Your warblers look quite a bit alike.
Yeah, I know. Thankfully, yellow-browed and Hume's warblers are both a bit better than the normal It's a lot better
The
than like
reed
reed
warblers.
warblers than great
Yeah.
reed warblers.
Yeah.
The acro warblers, I guess that genus is called.
Mhm.
Yellow brows and stuff are they're quite cute. They're sort of kinglet-y sized
Ooh.
round little guys with eyebrows and kind of a greenish tone to them. I really wanted to get Pallas's leaf warbler, but somehow it's another one of those three basically that are very similar, but it's like it's the best looking one in my opinion. It's the smallest and it has a nice yellow crown. But sadly, it's not as rare as Hume's warbler, but I never managed to catch up with one. So
We're all looking forward to birding with you when you get back.
yes, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to reintroducing myself to the Washtenaw birds.
Yeah. We're having some really just fun times where we get to see our friends because there's a good bird somewhere. And since we've all been locked down and keeping more isolated because of COVID, it's really a blessing to be a birder, you know? Yeah. That's
One
really
interesting lockdown story I have, if you remember the mockingbird photos that I
Yes.
showed, that bird was a really big deal over here, given its rarity. But it was found during the middle of lockdown where you were not allowed to travel at all.
Mhm.
I walked down to see it, but when I arrived there, this was the first morning after it had been seen, there was a crowd of like probably 30 or 40 people,
Mhm.
none of them from around here. It was not great.
And they were not wearing masks.
Some of them were, but yeah, it was not a good situation for
No.
sure.
No.
Especially because they were all like in at-risk groups, and this is before the vaccine
Yes.
was really
Right.
becoming a thing. So yeah,
Kind of like how nervous we all were when the Kirtlands showed up at
Yeah.
Waterworks Park in Ipsy,
Mhm.
and we were all squished together trying to see it. Yeah.
this is especially bad because the location, it was in a back garden, but the
Mhm.
only way to see it was to go down this like little fenced alley that was very narrow, and so everyone was kind of squished into this narrow alley. It was just not good at all.
Not good. Not good.
I got there really early, and as soon as people started arriving, I just left. And I've seen mockingbirds before as well, so I wasn't really too
Yeah.
bothered. But
Have you been able to be vaccinated over there?
not yet. They're doing it by age group, and right now they're
Oh.
only at 37-year-olds.
Wow.
So
So hopefully by the time before you have to come get on the airplane, right?
I'm hoping so. If not,
Yeah.
I'm getting it in the US, I guess, the second I get
Yeah.
off the plane.
Yeah, it's walk-ins everywhere here now.
Yeah, I know. All my family has been vaccinated over there, and
Mhm.
I am very envious.
Yeah, I hope you get it soon.
I really really want to get it as soon as possible, because I really don't want to go to. I don't know if I would even go to Ecuador if I can't get it beforehand. So
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions or comments? Sarah?
Oh, Ben, what wonderful photographs.
I
They
Thank
were
you.
just
Mhm.
incredible. And I
Thank
was
you.
wondering, what kind of camera did you use, a scope or
So
to get
Mm.
so close up?
yeah, the camera I use for most of those is a Nikon D500 with 500 millimeter PF lens. It's like it's one of the new Nikon lenses that's a lot. It's very small and compact for a 500 millimeter lens. But yeah, I've really enjoyed using that setup. To be honest, it's gotten me much better photos than I ever used to
Mhm.
be able to manage. So
Anyone else? Oh, thank you, Ben. It was such a treat. Your
Thanks,
photos
Jen.
are really fabulous.
Thank
That cuckoo series, I've never seen anything like it. So
thank you very much.
intimate and just you felt like you're right there. But you're
Definitely, if you're ever in London, check out Colin the Cuckoo, because he really, it's ridiculous, to be honest, how close he gets. I mean, he really, really does not care about people. I mean, I was laying down getting the other photos, and he just suddenly like flew directly at me and landed and was hopping about basically just immediately in front of me. It was crazy.
Super. Yeah. Well, we'll see you soon. And thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
It was
everyone.
great to see everyone. And I hope to see you all next month in the June program for Don Chalfant out in the field or at our Thursday walks the next couple weeks. Happy birding and happy spring.
Great. Thanks again, Ben.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Ben.